Hello, we're at the 2023 Spring Meetings here at the World Bank headquarters, and my name is Nabila Assaf. I'm a manager in the Fragility, Conflict and Violence Group, and with us is Mirjana Spoljaric, if I got that right. Please say your name for me.
Spoljaric.
Yes, the president of the International Committee for the Red Cross, so welcome.
Thank you, Nabila.
So I understand this is your first spring meetings here as the president of ICRC. So share with us what your impressions are so far. I know it's just started. And what are you coming with in terms of your priorities and areas that you're interested in?
It's actually a very positive experience for me coming from the ICRC to the spring meetings. And the ICRC is one of the oldest, if not the oldest, humanitarian organization working in roughly 100 conflict contexts across the globe. So it was positive for me to see how much the World Bank embraces and prioritizes to a certain extent conflict and crisis situations. It's part of its day-to-day journey.
Yeah.
And in relation to that, also the pragmatic approach and the realistic approach to climate change impacting crisis situation and aggravating the situation of the civilian population already strained by armed violence and fragile situations. And then last but not least, and that was probably the most positive part for me so far, is to what extent the ICRC embraces partnership with the World Bank and vice versa as well. So there seems to be a genuine mutual interest in working together and finding out how we can operationalize the interface between development and humanitarian assistance.
There's so much we can learn from each other from the humanitarian and development perspective, and I understand that in these last 6 months you've traveled quite extensively, including to the Sahel, the Horn of Africa, and you were even in Syria just after the earthquake. Can you share with us a little bit in terms of what you've seen based on your travel in those different situations, and what maybe you would conclude on that in terms of your vision for our relationship between the humanitarian and development work between ICRC and the World Bank?
Thank you. My approach to humanitarian assistance is with an eye that comes from the development assistance side, but also from the security and political side, which formed a large part of my previous professional life. And what I see now working with the ICRC and leading the ICRC is that there are some parts to humanitarian assistance that correspond to probably the public knowledge of humanitarian assistance, which means we bring protection and we bring assistance to the people affected by conflict in very traditional ways, in forms of tents, blankets, and in forms of dialogue with authorities to improve, for instance, the conditions for detainees. Now, what I also see is that humanitarian assistance comes very close to what you do from the development perspective when it comes to sustaining and supporting the provision of public services.
Right.
Let me give you a very concrete example. Water trucking is the last resort. We only bring water in containers or bottles if there's no other means of bringing water to the people. But in most situations, we work with the local water authorities in sustaining the provision of water to the population through very traditional means of service delivery.
That makes a lot of sense and is really consistent, I think, with how we also understand the importance of our collaboration with humanitarian agencies in that seeking to try to continue to deliver services, sometimes though through humanitarian agencies can be actually the best solution, but keeping an eye on the sustainability of that service delivery. And I know that we work together in a number of very challenging contexts like Yemen or Myanmar or South Sudan. Do you have any impressions so far since you've started at ICRC on the nature of our relationship on the ground?
I think the relationship is a very good one, but it's also a very promising one in the sense that we can probably strategically and very practically expand it where we can build on each other's comparative advantages. You have the opportunity to work with governments on long-term development plans. You have to work on sustaining economies in the medium and long term. What we bring is access.
Yes.
For a number of reasons. We are neutral, independent, impartial. We are a recognized humanitarian organization over decades, over 160 years, unquestioned for its neutrality standpoint and the way we are working. That gives us operational space in regions that are not reachable for others because of security reasons, or because the political environment, or because of sanctions regimes that impede other intergovernmental actors, in particular, of providing assistance. In this nexus situation, we can work together and we can see how you can benefit from our trust of the local population, from our presence, established presence on the ground, and we can benefit from the authority and the expertise and the capital that you bring to the table.
No, I absolutely agree, and I think a key element in us being able to sustain our work on the longer term development goals means that we need to remain engaged in the short term, and very often the only way to do that is actually working with agencies like ICRC. So can you share with us a little bit in terms of what your priorities are during your tenure?
My priority is access. I think the organization has been designed to be as close as possible to populations affected by conflict.
Yeah.
We have a very unique mandate in certain fields. In other fields, we can fill gaps where others can't be because of our character and setup, because of the support that stems from the Geneva Conventions, which have been ratified by all states in the world. And this consensus constitutes one of the strongest international consensus that we can think of. Now, this gives us access to people, and this access has to be maintained through confidential dialogues, through having the operational capacity in the field and pushing that capacity further, and making sure that we can build on our presence in the field where we need to be. And for this, we need to mobilize resources. We need to continue mobilizing support, because you see the humanitarian system being heavily under pressure at the moment. All this will have to go hand in hand together with our partners, like the World Bank, exploring how we can improve the effectiveness of aid to prevent humanitarian fallout. But then when we have to come in as humanitarian assistance, with forms of humanitarian assistance, that we make sure that our assistance is as sustainable in its impact as it can be.
Well, it's great meeting you and talking with you. Thanks for joining us.
It's a pleasure.